Welcome to episode 4 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today my guest is Nicholas Di Lorenzo of Panorama Mixing and Mastering. Today we talk about why learning by teaching is so important. Having an in-depth understanding of the tools will make you a better mixer and mastering engineer, as well as why having systems in place makes your workflow that much quicker. It's a great discussion. I can't wait for you to hear all about it. Stay tuned. What's That Sound podcast.
You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts.
Well, welcome to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. Today, my guest is Nicholas Di Lorenzo from Panorama Mixing and Mastering. Thanks, Nick, for joining me today. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me in. I'm super excited. You're super accommodating, especially with this setup and just jumping in.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Make it happen where I can.
Exactly. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, let's kick it off with, a little bit about yourself. Just a bit of a background of what it is and what you do currently, and then we'll get into the how you got here conversation.
Yeah, so I run a mastering studio as a mastering engineer. What that means for me in my day, as I was explaining when I got in, it means not only doing sessions, but managing the business, jumping on calls at 5:30 in the morning and having a baby puke all over your laptop and try and manage calls in between that and actually getting your business done and getting the kids off to school and then getting into work. And once you get into work, it's not just, like I say, it's a million things I'm doing now. So it's not just the studio, it's a lot of like content education and actually just my relationships B2B with other producers and engineers. Yep. And
you are a busy man. You're one of the busiest people I know. I would bet my life on it that you're up there in the top 5 busiest people I know.
So. Yeah, it's hard to put it into like a this is what I do, and people are like, oh, that's what you do. It's like,
a little bit of what I do.
So many tentacles to it, but yeah.
Yep, beautiful. And let's talk a little bit about your background. Where did music come into play for you? Was it always something that was integral in your life, or did it kind of start later in life? Or
well, I've been as a career musician, according to the Wiggles fan newsletter of 1997, a performing musician, because there's a little photo of me there with like a drum and guitar and stuff where I was there. So no, it's like I enjoyed music from a young age, and then I learned piano and drums, and then recorded bands in school, and then sort of just migrated there. But my first foray was on the Wiggles fan newsletter, 1997 thereabouts. So I've been in the media for a long time. Been impressed for a long time.
And were you always interested in tech? Because you're obviously an analytical brain. I mean, if anyone's seen your YouTube, if you haven't, please check it out. It's amazing. The depth that Nicholas goes into on his YouTube channel for the smallest little details of mastering and mixing and things like that is crazy. But was the technical side of music always a big thing for you, or did that again come later in life?
It was not that I was ever really that good at it. Like I was always excited by the technology. Mm-hmm. Oh wow, these can do these things, and especially being younger, you have a more immature mind, or at least I did. Mm-hmm. So I'd try and run before I could even walk. I'd be like, yes, I'm gonna get I got this like multi-track mixer and all these microphones, and tried to mic up the drums. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna sound great, because I read all in like forums and I think Gear Sluts at the time, and this is and like it was just absolutely shocking what I was putting out. So like I always loved the technology side, and it wasn't until you get your ass kicked a little bit in the industry to actually understand the pedigree, the level, the commitment to what people put in to actually produce great sounding records, that you actually go, oh, okay, I'm going to eat some humble pie here and get back to basics and take the time and patience to really understand what's happening, what's going on, how I can make the most of the technology I have around me to create great sounding records.
So you got a multi-track recorder. What age was that?
I had one when I was I had like a 10-track Yamaha when I was 14. And then before I started uni, it would have been year 12, I got like a 24 track, a Big Allen and Heath one. And I had no fucking clue what I was doing. Yeah. So like, oh, cool. I can plug lots of shit into here and it looks good because there's like lots of knobs and stuff. And the output was pretty average, to say the least.
Yeah. And you studied?
Yeah. Studied at RMIT, and that was good. I think that was good and fair, especially for my age at the time, because I was, young and out of high school, and I needed that structure, so to speak. The information was super rudimentary. It's like it's super basic. You can find half the information out on YouTube, but I think the learning structure was important for me because I was just very young. Yeah. Had a bit of immaturity to myself. Yeah. So I needed that guide. I couldn't have ever done that independently. It wasn't geared towards that at the time.
And I think it's just a cool environment. I studied at NMIT, so I did TAFE. I was like, TAFE instead of actual university, so it was a little bit different. But I think the actual environment and just being around people that are also interested in music and learning how music works in a different way to just playing guitar or playing drums or something like that. It's just cool to be in that environment and having those sorts of conversations on the daily. I think that was one thing for me that was always really fun, and you just got to geek out a bit when you wouldn't normally in everyday life unless you're in a band or something like that. I think that was something that I really took from school as well. But that's awesome, man. Did you have any musical idols back in the day? Who were they? Who were they for you?
Would have been like Ben Folds.
Yep.
The Eels, the Raconteurs. Like, I really liked that.
So like,
cool.
Yeah.
Who else? I was a big fan of Pomplamoose before they like blew up.
I've never heard of them.
Oh wow, really? Jack Conti, the guy who owns Patreon.
Okay.
Him and his partner have like a duo. They do like really cool cover. They call video songs, where they film every instrument being performed on the record, like a multi-track, and then they make it a video song, like as in like a video clip, but like you see every moving part. Yes,
that's cool.
Yeah, just like it was very music in terms of like
Ben Folds, unbelievable,
exactly,
unbelievable stuff. Was there any you like producer idols, any engineering idols that you were aware of, or was it just music?
Not that I really understood. Like, I'd read like a Sound on Sound or this at the other, and you'd see names like Andrew Sheps or this at the other. To be honest, I didn't know what the fuck they were doing at the time. Like, as in, like, I didn't understand that process well enough. I didn't have enough of an appreciation of the craft to be like it, but I just saw their name alongside other famous stars. I'm like, oh, they're really cool. Yeah. And not actually understanding more about it.
Yep. And so was it during the time that you were at university, or after it that you started working in the studio as a what's the word? An assistant?
During.
Yep.
Intern and assistant during, and freelance during.
Yep.
Tell
us a little bit about that. What was that like?
Freelance was very interesting because I sucked at recording, and I was still doing it freelance. And the only reason why I think I got away with it because people were really nice.
Yeah, okay.
Like they were friends and stuff like that, and you're doing them a favor, so they're kind in their words, they're kind in their gesture. Then moving into an internship position, you get your ass kicked a little bit because you're like, oh wait, I'm actually really bad at this.
So did you weren't aware of that at the time?
No way, because I had control over the workflow, the way things are put together. I could do things in my own time, so it wasn't really conducive to a commercially productive career. It was just me doing my own shit, and people pay me $50 there. So it's like, okay, is what it is. And then going into an internship, it's sort of like, okay, no. There's a lot more structure. There's a lot more like boundaries which are set in terms of just even the relationship between the artist, the engineer, the intern, and the way things are set up. And I realized, wow, I'm like really far behind on where I should be if I want to make it something serious. So recording never ended up being for me in terms of actually being a recording engineer. Yeah. And then getting an assistant position and mastering studio was a bit different because that was like, okay, I understood the structure, understood what I needed to do, and also the way you engage in the craft was much more conducive to like my just like what suited my personality and what I needed and how I operated. So yeah, it was a pretty rapid like sort
in
of
what
progression.
way? Like, because
Well,
obviously,
okay, you've recorded sessions here.
Yep.
You know how artists can be in terms of timeliness, in terms of the time you start and finish sessions, in terms of even just ebb and flow of a session in terms of their creativity, especially if you've got multiple, musicians and one wants to do guitar tracking now, or another one is restringing when they were meant to start, doing a rhythm section. Like, I just wasn't good at managing those moving components. I didn't have the interpersonal skills to make that.
Right.
You go into a mastering studio, the mixes are done, everything's set.
Yep.
And you just have to sit down, listen, and then make decisions. And you don't have to stay until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatnot. So much better for me.
Right. So you figured that out pretty quickly. That was like,
oh yeah,
was it like immediate as soon as you?
Oh, it was like the like literally the first day interning.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was infatuated by the technology, but I really didn't understand, number one, a lot about it. Number two, the workflow in a professional setting. So I jump in the studio and I'm telling the lead engineer what mics we should be using on the drums. I was like, and that was super nice. Like, most engineers would bite your head off, but super nice. Just pull me aside. Hey, I know you're excited and that's cool, but just letting you know, I'm running the show here. I was like, okay, fair enough. That's fair. At the time, it's like, you're just so excited. So, yeah, anyway.
It's a hard pill to swallow to be told, hey, step back and know your place a little
bit.
Yeah,
but they did it in a really kind-mannered way. So it was like, okay, I was able to take it on constructively.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of ways that could go wrong. I mean, I had one experience in an AV job and it went the opposite way. The guy who was in charge of it just, give me that, I'll do it. Just go and move some stuff. And it was like immediately turned me off that world. And I know a lot of people in AV that really love that side of things and have good mentors or leaders in that and they love it. But for me, anytime I hear that, hear stories about the AV world and stuff, it just immediately a negative experience. So it definitely could have gone another way. So it's great that you had someone that was able to give it to you gently. So when you do you take that sort of approach when you have to give feedback to people and how often do you have to give that sort of feedback to people? Is it something that's in your everyday life or
which sort of people, like my clients?
Well, your clients, anyone that you're working alongside, anything like that.
So with my clients, it's pretty black and white, because they come to me with, we want to achieve X, Y, Z. Yep. So it's not necessarily me having to be gentle or harsh. It's me just being black and white and me going, okay, well, you said you want your record to sound X, Y, Z, and where it's currently sitting, these changes would have to be made. Please consider them. It's not really personal. It's just objective minded.
Yeah.
And like I said at the start of this, I have a lot of relationships B2B with other engineers and producers. I'm much more blunt with them than that situation that happened with myself, only because there's a lot more on the line for them. A lot of producers and engineers, they're trying to make a career, they have a lifestyle, not a lifestyle like we're living richly, but in terms of, they might have families or people they're responsible for, or a mortgage and stuff they have to take care of. And I don't think, at least in my sense, being kind with the way I tell them advice or give them advice when they ask for it is going to help them. I'm just blunt and tell them, look, this is what you've said and this is the way I see it. Yep. This is the reality of it. Take it or leave it, and leave it there, only because I let them understand the gravity of their career, and if they're trying to make something of it or trying to stay above board, what actually has to happen, because we're in a creative industry and means we have a lot of creative minds here, but that doesn't necessarily link up with sustainable business practices all the time.
You're absolutely right. I want to take it back again to how your learning style has changed over time, and if there's any kind of advice that you can impart on people that are listening to who are just starting out, and the ways that you refined your learning over time. So how that looked in the start versus how it looks now.
Yeah, in the start I wasn't really learning. I was just doing a whole bunch of shit and then figuring out what worked. which is, you know, not bad, but it's not necessarily good. Now I try and use as many resources at my fingertips and also as many different sorts of resources at my fingertips to learn new things and understand more about my process, both business-wise and practice-wise, in terms of how I work with audio, whether that be books or courses or going to talk to people or engaging in workshops or even like one of the best ways to learn is to teach.
Yeah.
Because it's really funny. I do have a YouTube channel and I'm putting stuff out there constantly. But as I'm doing that, I'm realizing how much of the stuff, like I might touch on one topic. An example would be like FabFilter Pro L2, the limiter.
Yep.
I'll touch on that topic once, and then I'll come across, oh wait, as I look deeper into it, I'm like, oh shit, that was completely wrong. And then you know, I was like, okay, no. Now I have to reteach this. And when you try and articulate, you know, your practice and give advice, you're very careful with your words because you want other people to extract accurately, number one, and number two, usefully. So, you know, you can say a whole bunch of fancy words like intermodulation distortion and you know, second and third order harmonics, and people are like, oh, that's so cool, and oh wow, and but that means crap unless they can really understand what that is, how it's implemented, the practicalities of certain terminology. So then you become, so when you have to explain something specifically and with intent, you start like, I'll put plans together and I'll read and I'll go, this doesn't actually make any sense.
Yeah.
What's going on there? And then you relearn something that you've thought you've learned only for the purpose of making it more articulate and helping someone else. You're actually helping yourself because you get a deeper understanding of what you're doing.
Well, it's almost, I correlate that to like when people are studying for, you know, university or whatever. One of the best ways some people learn is by, you know, rewriting all of the stuff that they've learnt about, and that's one form of what you're doing but you're just putting it out into the public. So and does that is that confronting in any way, or do you really like that when people have something to say to you? Maybe you want to check that out. Or
I appreciate it. Like so many things. The limiter, the attack time on the FabFilter Pro L2, I got called on. Fair enough. One of the equations I used on a video quite a while back on advanced time domain calculations was like bluntly wrong. Like, and then I looked at it, I'm like, holy fuck. Like, half of it, like, for capacitor discharge and charge times was completely right, which was awesome. People loved that. But the other one was like, and I looked at it and I go, what was I doing there? That's like fundamental 101 math. Is like, so, and then I get pulled up on that, the standard clipper, you know, somebody, and it was actually funny, somebody's like, oh, you know, you're not using it properly. And I'm like, yes, I am. Not because I was being stubborn, just because I was relatively confident that I was. And then I think it was like, this is actually for a video I'm shooting later today. I've realized, oh no, wait a second, I'm really wrong on how I'm using this. And yeah, it's just, I invite it and I enjoy it because it's like, cool, I learned something better. It's good.
I mean, the thing that strikes me as you being different and why I love working with you is your wantingness to really unpack everything and have a really thorough understanding. Me, for example, I am more, I guess, going on vibe, and I love producing and working with people and building their songs. And, you know, when it comes to a mixing standpoint, it's very much not, I'm not in any way saying that you're not listening, because you absolutely are. But for me, I'm not as wanting to dive deep into every little aspect, but that is what I love about you and what I really value about you as a colleague and someone that is sharing with YouTube and your courses and stuff like that. What is it about diving into every little thing that you really love?
It's just an understanding of the craft. It becomes like an extension of yourself. It's like when we learn primary and secondary colors. We learn our primary colors, and then we know how secondary colors are made. And we're like, oh wow, so yellow and red make orange. Cool. That's that sort of like input and output, and then you start thinking of audio similarly. So you go, okay, like we've got a signal that's passing through. We've got the source signal. It passes through. It might be routed through a bus or goes through a set of inserts, and then like, how is that that signal affected, but and then so what's happening to affect it? Okay, and what is the net result of that? And then it goes through its output stage, and then you're like, okay, well, to have intentionality behind what you're doing, it's really useful to understand what goes on behind it. And whilst people can look at that and go, oh, just use your ears, just if it sounds good, it sounds good. It's like, that's great. That really is. And I'm sort of like reading in my mind my script for my next video, but it's sort of like, but the reality is it's good to a point, but I know so many people who do things in sessions and they can't recreate it. So they're like, oh, that sounded good on this single for that album, but I can't get it happening on this next one.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, if let's reverse engineer what's actually happening there. You're not just throwing on a compressor. It might not just be a fast attack time. What is the signal going in there? What is actually happening to that signal? How is it coming out? And to recreate that, if you have a better understanding of your tools, of your application of those tools, of how the sound wave, or it's DSP, so it's not necessarily voltages, but the zeros and ones change. You have better practice and application to have that intuition to make those changes. So that's where it comes from me, because you've seen the nitty gritty I get into, and it's stupid. Like I even looking at some of it, I'm like,
what am I doing?
It's like I get why I'm doing it, but it's overkill, because like 99% of people won't appreciate it. But it's like, once you do that process consistently over many records, over it all adds up. And I think I've also got an obligation, because I'm at a point now with my mastering work where I'm in a sort of demand, and the price point I'm at or commanding, I don't want to just like piss on people's time and effort that they spend in a mix. Like, I genuinely got to put in the effort to make sure that it sounds as good as I know I can possibly give them.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think you make a really good point in the sense of, you don't have to do absolutely everything that you do on your channel. You don't have to explain everything, but you do. And the understanding that the viewer isn't going to take on absolutely everything that you explain, but the things that they do take, and we all do it. We take certain things from certain videos. We like certain engineers' workflow on how they set up mics on a drum kit, or how they process a channel, or, using effects routing or anything like that. We might not like absolutely everything that this one specific engineer does, but the pieces of gold from that one video that you might do where you explain L2 limiter, we might take one of those things and use it in our workflow, and it just makes it that much better. And for me, that's where I gain value from watching any sort of, tutorial or anything. I'm not going to do every single thing the way that engineer does it, but I'm going to take these little nuggets of wisdom and try it out next time and see if it works for me. And, it's huge. I love it.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it.
Let's get a little bit geeky.
Okay.
And let's talk about some of your favorite, whether it's now or in the past, pieces of gear, and why.
I don't know if I have any favorites. Like, that's
well, let's not even say favorites, but maybe just something that you're loving using at the moment, and why you're loving using it.
Actually, you know what? It's not going to be at the moment. It's going to be in the past.
Cool.
So the Tannoy Gold dual concentric speakers.
Okay.
They were very impressive to listen to. They, when I was assisting at Eden Sound, they had them in the room there.
Yep.
And they just had a great, impressive soundstage.
What do you listen for?
At the time, I can't remember. I was very young, and I was just listening, and I go, "Wow, these sound incredible."
Yeah.
Those are probably the most like sort of wow sort of moment. A lot of the gear I use, it's good for my workflow and whatnot, but nothing sort of like stands out as going, oh, I could not live without this. Like it's there, it does its job, and I'm happy for it. Bits of gear that's really outstanding. Yeah, those really took me by surprise.
What's your decision process when you're choosing pieces of gear for your studio?
Not much, because I don't tend to get too much often. The Dangerous Convert AD Plus I just got was sort of like a that one was. So I'll say one thing, especially because I'm assuming a lot of the audience will be from Australia for this podcast. So, in the pro audio game, where do I come in this being gentle about it? The pro audio game in Australia, service reliability and support is what you need to look for, because you're not just spending a couple $100 and you can go replace it. So these converters that I got was paid well over $4,000 for, and these are just 2 channels of analog to digital conversion.
Yep.
And previously I've used Antelope. Now Antelope's firmware support, and I can say this because I experienced it, is shit. Okay? It's, how much would have I paid 8 years ago for it? In the thousands. No, not even. It was probably $4,000 for my Antelope converters. Their firmware support for latest OS, into oblivion. As soon as they bring out a new unit, the old one they don't support. So it's like, okay, I'm limited. The reason why I was getting new converters is because my old ones cacked it.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I got to get new ones. So I called a buddy of mine over in LA. I'm like, okay, this is the situation. I know you got a few different models. What would you recommend to replace? And he goes, either the Antelope Pure 2 or the Dangerous Convert AD Plus. I go, okay, cool. Fortunately, we had a Dangerous AD Plus here in Australia, because actually when I was over in the States speaking to the Dangerous team, they don't even have any in stock at the moment. Okay. They're like, how the fuck did you get your hands on that? And the reason why I didn't go with Antelope, because even though the Pure 2 is a much newer unit, no more support on the OS. No more support on the OS. Why? And they're selling it. They're selling it for, it's still costing people. I think what's the Pure 2 like? It's still like $4,500 units, the same as the Dangerous, but no firmware support.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
But I think it's another really interesting point that people probably don't take the time to think about is making decisions based on your timeliness. And you're someone that is very, to a T, you have to be with your schedule. Yeah. And it's so important. And why would you waste your time and hours on work trying to figure something out?
Yeah. And I'll give you another example in terms of good support. Manly. Manly, my tubes went out on the Varium. I probably should have had spares, but I didn't know which one I needed. They were so on top of getting me tubes sent out to here during COVID so I could keep working. They were just on the money, super nice to deal with, and you gotta look at that, because you're not just making an investment in the product, you're making an investment in the company, and if the company will back you with that product. When I got my Neumanns, one of them came out of the box not sounding good. Like, I think because of the way it was wrapped and it's a sealed box, it fucked the cone up a bit or whatnot. And like literally in a week, I was able to just drive down, I think it was to Factory Sound, and they just like swapped it straight over.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's good. You need that because you're spending tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars on gear. I put it this way: when you're spending that sort of money on gear, all the gear sounds good. Okay. Yeah. All of it has its purpose. All of it has its, they're not using cheap parts. It's good quality stuff all around. So my biggest decision maker is like service and support.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I want to go back to Sonics and in a mastering session, I mean, if you don't have an understanding of what the mastering process is like, it's very specific. I mean, obviously every mastering engineer would have a slightly different workflow, but usually it's quite a similar process. There's the listening aspect, there's the decisions of what moves to make. They're usually very subtle moves that complement the track that you're listening to, and making it sound great at the end to get it to a certain point. I'm making this sound very remedial, but what I want to know is what decisions you make based on how much color you impart on a track. What are you listening for when you go, I need to push this harder, or I need to keep this in its original state? It's probably a very difficult question. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a bit of a weird question. Usually, I don't want to be doing anything, to be honest. If it's a good mix, I can usually sit back and be pretty transparent. And by transparent, I mean by measures of audio fidelity, which is introduction of any additional noise, distortion, change in tone, or change in phase. Noise being in harmonic forms of distortion, distortion being harmonic forms of distortion. But those are the 4 different sort of ways a signal can get manipulated or altered, which degrades the original signal. So if it's a good mix, I try and avoid using things like harmonic distortion or clipping and elements like that. Or even tone in terms of using too much EQ to reshape it. If it's a good mix, soft with the compression, being very careful about how I gain stage in and out of certain processes, not to impart too many harmonics, especially when you're going out in the analog chain, and keep things open, clean, manually edit things down. Now, if it's a bad mix, that's where I'm a bit more inclined to get a little bit more heavy-handed because, and by bad mix, I mean, typically the tone is out. So it's like, not enough low end or too much low end or too bright and too harsh or whatnot. Or it's too dynamic and like the section's just all over the place. Then I'll get a bit more heavy hand. I'll be like, okay, I might have to use some parallel compression here, smooth things out across the board. So it's a bit more even going from the verses to the choruses. The low end is like just super subby, but there's no real low mid. So I might, sort of tame that off and add a bit more harmonic saturation. So it translates better. So I'm listening to the mix itself. And if it's in a good pocket, I tend not to get heavy handed because if it's, just, it works.
Leave it as it is. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think, but you're aware of that decision of, over the years of listening to thousands and thousands of songs, what a great mix sounds like and what needs work. And it's really cool to be like, no, you know what? I'm just going to leave this one because it sounds great as is. And that's probably like the ideal thing to come in for you. Or do you really enjoy working on stuff that doesn't sound that great and being I get to be creative here?
Because it's I think what it is when you have a really good mix, it is a challenge to make something loud. So have a really good mix, drive it. So it's loud, it's commercially loud, it plays back against other tracks. If it's a good mix, and not change the tone of it or change the way it's moving. It's very difficult because it's so easy just to be a little bit too fast on the compressor and then it pumps. It's so easy to drive it a little bit too hard and then it starts to break up. It's like there's a fine line to balance there, and that's more of a tricky balancing act. It's super easy with a bad. Actually, I shouldn't say super easy. I'd say it is much more forgiving with a bad mix to start cranking distortion into it and reshaping it because you've got that, you can be liberal in that sense to be like, oh, I'm going to add 2 decibels to the top end and because it genuinely needs it. Whereas with a very good mix, it's like you can very quickly just throw things out of whack.
Yep. Now you don't only master, you mix as well. What does a good mix session look like to you?
A good mixing session.
Yeah, well, I mean, like receiving stems, for example.
Oh, okay, that's simple. Like, typically, a producer that is signed off on the production, the artist is signed off on the production. Everybody loves the way things are sitting. That means getting it all sent to me as though I've got the production session in front of me. So the stems get sent to me wet, not dry, wet. I drop it in, I press play, and everything sounds as per the production mix people signed off on.
Great.
Because if they're signed off on the production mix, that means any changes I make thereon moving forward is an embellishment, is a step from that direction. Almost like a relay race. You're running a relay, pass the baton. Okay, running a relay, pass the baton. I don't want to do this thing. Like hate's a hard word, but it really irks me when people have bad experiences with mixing engineers because they sent across dry stems and then the mixing engineer has reproduced the track because they put their own reverb, they put their own effects and this, that, the other, and it doesn't resemble the production mix which an artist signed off on. And it's like, okay, well, that's a bit, that you just undermined the whole process which has come before you because a producer spent all this time adding reverb, delays, this, that, the other. You've asked them to take it off so you can do it. Somebody already signed off on the other one. So yeah, that's just at least just my take on how I'm working with mixes, because yeah, it gets really, really, really good results for clients.
Beautiful. I mean, it makes sense because the producer, the artist is used to hearing the song the way that they're used to hearing it.
Exactly.
And then if it goes off and changes it completely, they're like, what happened to my song?
And I know so many mixing engineers, and even myself when I was starting out, I would always get this like, I like the demo better. I like the demo better. And it was because I was working from the dry stems. If I'd work with the demo or the production demo with those wet stems, I wouldn't have had the issue of having to rebuild those productions.
Absolutely.
But, you know, that's self-inflicted, I guess.
Yeah. What are your favorite things to work on in a mix? Do you love drums? Do you love vocals?
No, when it all works.
Yeah.
It's just everything.
Yep.
Things I don't like are, you know, there's like little one-shots and effects and things like that. They're just sort of like, they're not an afterthought. I shouldn't say anything's an afterthought, but I sort of push them towards the end of doing them, just because it's sort of like, I got to automate these, and there's so many little details, and I'm like, you know, it's so much more fun when you're like got a bass line, you can like get that sounding good, or the drums smacking, or the vocals like really, you know, like any of those elements are so much more fun rather than like a 1-bar riser. It's like,
yeah,
okay, cool.
It's funny, those little elements, because like, you know, everyone calls them ear candy, but they're intended just to kind of grab your attention. And
I know.
Like, oh, that's
and you got to do it. You got to be careful with them, because they can ruin a mix if you get it wrong. But it's not. It doesn't make me like excited about the song so much as though it's just there as an auxiliary item.
Yep. In terms of your workflow has been refined and refined over the years. What sort of hacks, for lack of a better term, did you have to put in place to make your workflow a lot faster? Because your time's important. As someone that has a very busy life, you know, you're working on a whole bunch of different stuff. What sort of workflow things did you have to implement to make your life easier?
Templates are one. Templates just easy. Not because it's like you just throw everything in and then it pops it out. It just means that you've got your routing set up. You've got your tools that you usually use in front of you. Templates are a good one. Macros with what's it called? Automator on the Mac.
Right.
Creating macros for folder automation and exporting and things like that. That makes things really quick, because it's just there's no point, you know, doing a whole new folder hierarchy for every project. If you have 800 projects a year, 800 times how many folders is in a project? Maybe 15 folders, 15 times 800. You know, that many times of clicking Command N is like is a whole album getting mastered. You know, like, so
crazy.
having macros is good. Templates, those are probably the two main things.
Yep.
Having Dropbox is good. You should have Dropbox. Don't use other stuff.
We've had this conversation.
We've had this conversation. It's just so much. You know, just pay the money, get it. So many people use like Aldi versions, I'm going to call it, of file sharing, and you know, Dropbox. You know, there are certain things it can't do, or it's a little bit more expensive and whatnot, but it's just so clean and easy to use. The way it synchronizes, number one, and number two is the way you can send out links. People just download it. It's quick, it's easy, it's good. There are other services, even popular ones, which are just like really clunky to use, and I always get frustrated when I get sent mixes from them.
It's funny, like, we're making it sound comical, but it's so true. Like the improvement of workflow, not only in sessions and mixes and mastering sessions and whatever else, is like the other side of things that can just make you think less. Right? That's just the point of being a good at business, good at your craft. You don't have to think about those.
I don't upload anything.
Yeah.
I work from the cloud.
Yep.
So that way, like, when I have to send off masters, they're already in there. There's already a link generated for it. It's all there. As soon as the invoice gets paid, it gets sent off. I don't have to go, drag it in, then look at it, like, upload 60%, 70%. It's just there doing it as I'm working on it. So
beautiful. Let's start to wrap up. I want to know if you have any kind of key. Again, this is probably a very difficult question, but key bits of advice that you might have for anyone that wants to get into the mastering game, the mixing game, first of all, and then we'll talk artists. But beginning with, you know, mastering engineers and mix engineers, any crucial bits of advice that you think people should know?
crucial bits of advice. You need to work fucking hard. Like, it's easy to get plugins. It's easy to get gear. It's easy to do a few mixes, like I said, when I was freelancing for a few friends who were going to be nice to you. It's another thing keeping your skin in the game year on year and actually putting the effort into making sure you're serving people as good as you possibly can and giving them the output and giving them the satisfaction your clients need. So yeah, don't ever think just because the gear is accessible and that you can do a good job, because there are a lot of really talented mixing engineers out there that aren't practicing as a viable business, that it's easy. You have to be able to put the work in. Yeah,
that's very important. Anyone can download all of the plugins that a professional mix engineer has for a relatively cheap cost, and get a decent sounding mix. But you're right, the actual other side of things when it comes to business, when it comes to, interactions with peers, they're the intangible things that you need to work hard on and, get better at, I think, as well. So yeah, really good point. What about artists? What about the artists that you might work with on a one-to-one basis, or even just advice for artists that are communicating with their mastering engineers or anything like that? Do you have any advice for them?
Well, if for the first one, the second half of that question, artists communicating with their mastering engineers, if you've got a producer or a mixing engineer, use them as a middleman. Okay, use them as a conduit to articulating what you've been through in terms of putting that record together, in terms of helping that master engineer understand what you're going for. In terms of artists and careers, at the moment, I see a lot of artists doing incredible stuff. Okay. And that's where it ends for me, because I have no fucking clue how they're doing it. It's like it is a really hard landscape out there for artists, and I would be bullshitting my way through to say, oh, you just got to apply yourself. You got to have multiple streams of income. You got to do this. You got to be patient with yourself. Crap like that. It's like, no, I genuinely don't know how, because I'm working with some artists that are racking up big streaming numbers. And how they're doing it. Yes, they might have managers and they got backing and this, that, the other, but they still have to put in so much effort. And I don't know how they got to that position. I'm just not in that game deep enough to make a comment that I think people should be taking on, because that would just be bullshitting my way through.
No, that's cool. Anything that you want to share with anyone that might be listening? What's coming up? Any cool news that you can share, or anything that you've just worked on that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I will, because I always get asked this and I never really get the opportunity to plug my own stuff.
Go for it.
But if any of the technical stuff Stu and I have talked about has sort of piqued your interest or got you excited or you're interested in mastering, and you're an electronic music producer, I think that's specific.
Okay.
I have a mastering for producers course I put out with EDM Prod. Now, I'm not plugging it because I'm like, oh, 3,000 students have watched this and it sounds, and everybody's doing great and it's awesome. And, you're going to become the next, mastering engineer at Sterling Sound or whatever. No. The course is me genuinely putting together my applied knowledge of being in the industry and working on masters day in, day out.
Yep.
And yeah, it's something of high value, which I know, people who engage in it and are genuinely interested in that side of it will get something out. If you're just sort of pissing in the air and going, oh, I'll give it a go, but I don't really care. Well, then maybe it's not for you. But if it's something that you're passionate about and you want to understand more, deeper understanding of audio and mastering, then it's something that you'll definitely get value of. So I have no shame in putting that out there to the world. Beautiful
stuff, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Yeah, on Instagram, Panorama_mastering, on YouTube, Panorama Mixing and Mastering, my website, panoramamastering.com.au. All good places to see what I'm up to and engage in just my love for audio.
Beautiful. Well, I always love chatting to you, man. Thanks again for joining me. And if you loved what you heard today, you can follow us on socials, Instagram, YouTube, share it with a friend. That's how we can get this information out there. And once again, thank you. And we'll see you next time on What's That Sound podcast.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.